She turned off the alarm. She opened the front door. And then she waited downstairs, in the dark, while two men she had let into the house climbed the staircase to the second floor, to the bedroom where her mother and father lay sleeping. The men beat them to death with iron bars. It was not quick, and it was not clean. When it was over, the three of them tore through the house, pulled open drawers, scattered belongings across the floor, and arranged the scene to look like a robbery gone wrong. Strangers who had broken in, killed the couple, and fled into the night. But there were no strangers. There was no break-in. The young woman who switched off the alarm and unlocked the door was their own daughter. Her name was Suzane von Richthofen. She was a privileged, intelligent law student with every advantage in life, and she had just helped murder the two people who gave it all to her. For an inheritance, and for a boyfriend they refused to accept. For Brazil, this case would become something close to a national obsession, not because of how the killing was done, but because of who did it. This is the story of Suzane von Richthofen, fully, no filter. This is Uncut Cases. Real crimes, no filter. Let's get into it. The von Richthofens were not an ordinary São Paulo family. They were wealthy, educated, and they carried a name that turned heads. The same German name as Manfred von Richthofen, the First World War flying ace the world remembers as the Red Baron. Suzane's father, also named Manfred, was a successful engineer, a self-made professional who had built real security for his family. They lived in a large, comfortable house in Brooklyn, an affluent neighborhood in the south zone of São Paulo. There was money, there was status, there was a future that seemed already paved, smooth, and guaranteed. Suzane Louise von Richthofen was born in 1983, the elder of two children. She had a younger brother, Andreas. From the outside, her childhood was the kind most people only dream about. She grew up in a beautiful home with private schooling, comfort, and every door open to her. She was intelligent, she was articulate, she was studying law on the path to a respectable profession, the model of a privileged young woman with the world arranged neatly in front of her. But privilege is not the same thing as freedom, and a beautiful house is not always a happy one. The von Richthofen home was, by many accounts, strict and controlling. A household where the parents, and especially Manfred, kept a tight grip on the children's lives and expected obedience. Suzane was raised to follow a plan. The right school, the right career, the right kind of life. And as she grew into a young woman, a gap began to open between the daughter her parents expected her to be and the person she actually wanted to become. That gap, on its own, is the most ordinary thing in the world. Almost every family has some version of it. The teenager who chafes against the rules, the parents who push back. The slow negotiation of growing up. In nearly every case it resolves. People leave home. They build their own lives. They make peace, or they make distance. What makes the von Richthofen story so disturbing is that, in this house, an ordinary family conflict did not resolve in any of the ordinary ways. It curdled into something almost unthinkable. And the catalyst, the person who turned a normal teenage rebellion into a murder plot, walked into Suzane's life when she was still a teenager. His name was Daniel Cravinhos. Suzane was still a teenager when she began a relationship with Daniel Cravinhos. Daniel was a few years older and he came from a completely different world. His family was lower middle class. They worked with paragliding and sport equipment, a modest trade far from the engineers and the gated comfort of the von Richthofen household. To Suzane, Daniel may have represented something her own life didn't give her: freedom, rebellion, a way out from under her father's control. To Suzane's parents, he represented exactly the wrong thing. They disapproved, strongly. In their eyes, Daniel was beneath their daughter, not the future they had spent their lives building toward. And rather than soften over time, the disapproval hardened into a standoff. The more her parents pushed against the relationship, the more Suzane dug in. The more she dug in, the harder they pushed. It became a war of wills inside a single house, the kind that poisons every dinner and every conversation. It is worth pausing here because this is the part of the story that is genuinely uncomfortable. The ingredients of this case are not exotic. A teenage girl in love, parents who don't approve, a boyfriend from the wrong side of the tracks, resentment that builds and builds. These are the raw materials of 1,000 ordinary family dramas, the stuff of films and novels that end with reconciliation, or simply with a young woman growing up and moving on. In almost any other version of this story, time does its work and the wound heals. But Daniel Cravinhos did not come alone. He came with a brother, Cristian, and with a willingness to think about the unthinkable. And somewhere in that pressure cooker of teenage love, parental control, and class resentment, the conversation between Suzane and Daniel shifted. It stopped being about how to be together despite her parents. It started being about how to be together and rich with her parents gone. The dream of the relationship and the dream of the inheritance fused into a single monstrous idea. They would not wait her parents out. They would remove them. The breaking point, by most accounts, was money. Suzane went to her father and asked him to buy an apartment, a place where she and Daniel could live together. It was in a way a test, and Manfred failed it, from her point of view, in the worst possible way. He refused. He told her, in effect, that if she wanted a life with Daniel, she would have it without the family's money. For a normal person, that is the end of a difficult conversation. For Suzane, Daniel, and Cristian, it became the trigger. If the money would never be given, the money would be taken. Once the idea existed, the three of them began to make it real. And this is the detail that separates the von Richthofen case from a crime of sudden passion. It was planned, it was discussed, it was in the coldest sense organized. Suzane, Daniel, and Cristian agreed on the shape of it. They would kill Manfred and Mauricia. They would make the scene look like a robbery that turned violent. Intruders who broke in, killed the couple, and ran. And then the three of them would share the inheritance, the fortune that Suzane's father had refused to hand over. The entire plan rested on one person, Suzane. The Cravinhos brothers could swing the weapons, but they could not get into that house unnoticed. Suzane could. She lived there. She knew the routines. When her parents went to bed, how deeply they slept, where the bedrooms were. Most importantly, she knew the alarm and she had the keys. A locked, alarmed home in an affluent neighborhood is a fortress to a stranger. To the daughter who lived inside it, it was simply home, and every lock was hers to open. That is what makes this crime so chilling and so different from the work of an outside killer. There would be no forced entry because the person controlling the door was family. There would be no struggle at the threshold, no alarm screaming into the night, no neighbors alerted. The most sophisticated security in the house was rendered useless by a single fact. One of the people it was meant to protect had decided to let the danger in. They chose their roles carefully. Suzane would handle access, the alarm, the door, the timing. She would also build distance for herself, an alibi, so that when the bodies were found, she could appear to be somewhere else, an innocent daughter returning to horror. The brothers would do the killing, and they settled on a method that tells you everything about how the night was meant to go: iron bars. Not a quiet poison, not a staged accident, but blunt, brutal force. The kind of violence that could be blamed on desperate strangers. The plan was not just to kill Suzane's parents. It was to kill them in a way that pointed the world in the opposite direction. Everything was in place. All that was left was to choose the night. It happened on the night of October 31st, 2002. The evening began, on the surface, like something ordinary. Suzane took her 15-year-old younger brother, Andreas, out of the house. They went out for the night, an internet cafe, time spent away from home. An outing that looked innocent and served a darker purpose. It put Suzane somewhere else with a witness, and it built the appearance of a normal night. Their parents stayed home. Manfred and Mauricia went to bed, in their own house, in their own room, with no reason on earth to think this night was different from any other. They fell asleep trusting that their home was safe and that their daughter was simply out. Later, Suzane came back. She let Daniel and Cristian into the family home. the home she had grown up in, the home her parents believed was secure. She had disabled the alarm. The two men climbed the stairs to the second floor, to the bedroom where Manfred and Mauricia were sleeping, and they killed them with iron bars. Her mother and father never had the chance to fully wake, to understand what was happening, to defend themselves, to even ask why. They were beaten to death in their own bed in the dark by men their daughter had escorted up the stairs. Then came the part that has disturbed Brazil for more than 20 years, the performance. With the killing done, the group set about disguising it. They ransacked the house, pulled open drawers, threw clothes and belongings across the rooms, made it look ransacked and chaotic the way people imagine a robbery should look. The goal was simple and cold, to point investigators toward phantom intruders and away from the family. Suzane's younger brother, Andreas, was never a target. He was not harmed. He was, in the most literal way, spared, left to wake into a world where both his parents were dead and his sister had helped arrange it. The parents were the obstacle. The inheritance was the prize. Andreas was simply collateral to a plan built around money. And then Suzane stepped into the role she would have to hold for the cameras, the neighbors, and the police. The devastated daughter who came home to a nightmare. She would have to cry on cue, accept condolences, attend the funerals of the people she had helped kill, and look the investigators in the eye. For a few days she did. For a few days the story of the tragic robbery held. But a lie that large has a structure, and structures can be tested. And almost from the beginning, this one did not hold its weight. The staged robbery began to fall apart almost as soon as investigators walked through the door. A real robbery has a logic, and this scene didn't follow it. Thieves who break in to steal do not leave valuables sitting in plain view. They do not climb the stairs, walk past easier targets, and focus all their violence on two specific sleeping people. The brutality here was too concentrated, too personal. Manfred and Mauricia hadn't been killed in a panic during a theft. They had been sought out, in their bed, and beaten to death with deliberate force. To trained eyes, it looked less like a burglary and more like an execution that someone had tried clumsily to dress up as one. And then there was Suzane herself. In the days after the murders, people around the investigation began to notice something off about the grieving daughter. Her composure was wrong. Where investigators expected a young woman shattered by the violent death of both her parents, they often saw someone controlled, contained, strangely cool. Grief has many faces, and shock can look like calm. But the more they watched her and the more her account was tested against the evidence, the more the cracks showed. Suspicion turned, as it so often does in these cases, toward the people closest to the victims, and that meant Suzane and her boyfriend. Under questioning, the carefully built story came apart. The timeline didn't hold. The staged scene didn't match a real robbery, and eventually the truth came out in the worst possible way, through confession. Within a short time of the murders, Suzane, Daniel, and Cristian were all arrested. The daughter had not simply known her parents were going to be killed. She had switched off the alarm, unlocked the door, and walked the killers into the house. When the truth reached the public, the reaction in Brazil was not just horror at the violence, it was disbelief at the source of it. This was not a stranger, not an intruder, not a desperate criminal from the margins. This was an 18-year-old daughter from a respected, wealthy family, a law student of all things, someone studying the very system of justice that would now consume her, who had helped plan and enable the murder of the two people who raised her. And the motive was almost insultingly small against the scale of the crime: money and a boyfriend her parents wouldn't accept. The country could not look away. The case had a name, a face, and a question that refused to go quiet. How does a child do this to her own parents? The trial came in July 2006, nearly 4 years after the murders, and it became one of the most closely watched criminal proceedings in Brazilian history. The cameras, the headlines, the public arguments, all of it converged on a single young woman and the question of what she really was. Suzane von Richthofen was convicted of the qualified double homicide of her parents and sentenced to 39 years and 6 months in prison. Her boyfriend, Daniel Cravinhos, the man who wielded the violence, received the same sentence, 39 years and 6 months. His brother, Cristian Cravinhos, was sentenced to 38 years and 6 months. The court treated it for what it was, a planned, motive-driven execution carried out by 3 people working together, with Suzane as the indispensable key that unlocked the house. But more than the sentences, what fixed itself in the national memory was her demeanor. During the police reconstruction of the crime and across years of coverage and court appearances, Suzane often came across as cold, composed, detached, eerily unmoved for someone describing how her own mother and father had been beaten to death. To much of the Brazilian public, that detachment became the defining image of the case. It fed a portrait of a young woman who could plan a murder, allow it to happen feet from where she waited, and then calmly perform her own innocence afterward. A person who seemed to many to feel nothing at all, whether that was true coldness or the frozen affect of someone in shock and on trial for her life. The country had already decided. Suzane von Richthofen had become a villain with a face, and that face would follow her for the rest of her life. Here is what I want to say directly. The von Richthofen case has never really let go of Brazil, and there is a reason it produced not 1 but 2 feature films in 2020. One told from Suzane's side and one from Daniel's, plus a streaming series. Plus, in 2026, a documentary in which Suzane herself finally broke a silence of more than 2 decades. The country keeps coming back to her, keeps arguing about her. Was she the mastermind? A cold, calculating manipulator who used a love-struck boyfriend as a weapon and engineered the murder of her own parents? Or was she a controlled, damaged young woman pulled into something monstrous by the men around her and by a household that had taught her obedience but not love? The films and the documentaries exist precisely because there is no comfortable answer. And a story without an answer is a story that never closes. But strip away the fascination, and the facts underneath are simple and ugly. Manfred and Maricia von Richthofen were asleep in their own bed when their daughter turned off the alarm and walked their killers up the stairs. They were beaten to death for money and for a relationship they had tried to discourage. Their teenage son Andreas lost both of his parents in a single night, and then had to absorb the second blow that his own sister had helped plan it. He is the quiet victim of this story, the one the cameras rarely linger on, the boy who survived to inherit nothing but grief. And here is the part that unsettles people the most, the part that makes this case feel unfinished even now. Suzane von Richthofen did not vanish into a cell forever. In January 2023, after serving part of her sentence and moving through Brazil's progressive prison regime, she was released on parole. She is out. In the years since, she has built a new life. She married, she became a mother, she has fought in the courts over her name and over family inheritance. And in 2026, she stepped in front of a camera to tell her version of why it all happened. The 2 people she helped kill have been gone for more than 20 years. They did not get to grow old, to meet a grandchild, to rebuild anything. Their daughter did. The inheritance she killed for was never cleanly hers, but the life beyond the prison gate in the end was. That is the discomfort this case leaves you with. Justice was done in the legal sense. A trial was held, a sentence was handed down, years were served. And still, a woman who helped beat her own parents to death is walking free, raising a child, telling her story. While Manfred and Maricia are 2 names on a pair of graves. So what do you think? Was Suzane von Richthofen the architect of this crime? Or a follower who found exactly the right people to carry out what she already wanted? And does a finite sentence, fully served, ever truly balance a crime like this one? Drop your take in the comments. I read every one.